if you are a novelist, we'll tell everybody in the publishing world and in the film and television world, this is a book you should probably pay attention to. There was a recent study looking at the movies that got made in the last 6 years, and half of them, roughly, came from original screenplays or adaptations of novels. The Blacklist now has visibility over the inputs that represent 50% of the film production. And I don't think anybody really cares all that much about whether something was adapted or a remake. They just want it to be good.
I'm Bob Safian. I'm here with Franklin Leonard, founder and CEO of The Blacklist. Franklin, thanks for joining us.
It's going to be bad.
The last time you were on this show, it was the morning after the Oscars, and we talked about the state of the movie business.
But
right. Today, I want to zero in on The Blacklist itself, because you've recently embarked on an expansion. The Blacklist started as a side project for you, an underground kind of crowdsourcing effort aimed at identifying the best Hollywood scripts that weren't getting made. In the years since, you built it into a platform for scriptwriters and playwrights for training, identifying talent, linking talent to opportunity. Now you're expanding into something new. So can you explain to us sort of where the Blacklist is, what the expansion is, and why you've gone down this road?
Yeah, like you said, it started as this annual survey of Hollywood's most liked unproduced screenplays that quickly became an arbiter of taste in the business and sort of served early notice of writers and scripts that the industry should be paying attention to with great success. And for the last couple of years, a lot of folks in the book space had been asking me when we were going to expand into novels. And, I tend to be a research data-driven person. And I also knew that the reason that the Blacklist worked was that it had been purpose-built for the film and television industry ecosystem. I was trying to solve a problem in that space.
Something you knew personally, something you'd lived through, right?
Yeah. I mean, before we launched the website, I'd been in the industry for more than 10 years. I've been there for more than 20 now. So we were building something that could optimize this system in the film and television and then theater space. And Howie Sanders at Anonymous Content was really adamant that I seriously consider this and set me up on a series of meetings with people in the book industry. And what I was, pleasantly found was that people were really excited about it, that there was a recognition that there was a lot of great writing happening in places that they didn't know about and that they couldn't find. And that we could, be an industrial-sized metal detector and take an infinite pile of haystacks and find the needles. And that's really what we built. So the Blacklist expanded into fiction in early September. It means that if you are a novelist, if you have an unpublished novel, a self-published novel, a published novel, you can create a writer profile on the Blacklist website, list all the things that you created so that they're searchable by people in the publishing, film and television and theater businesses. And if you want to get feedback on your work or you want to make it directly available to those people, you can host it on the site, you can purchase feedback. And when that feedback is really positive, we'll tell everybody in the publishing world and in the film and television world, this is a book you should probably pay attention to. And again, the goal remains to identify and celebrate the best writing we can find. We're going to find a lot of great books that a lot of people are going to put out and a lot of books that are going to get adapted into film and television. And, it's a tide that raises all boats.
The last time you were on the show, we talked a bit about American Fiction, the Oscar-winning film that highlights the book business and its limitations. So that film wasn't necessarily an instigating factor for your expansion, just a coincidence.
No, I think it's largely a coincidence, but when you mention it, a part of the things that Cord's brilliant movie explores are things that we're trying to address, which is that, there's a very, like in Hollywood, the system of folks who have access to the resources to sort of make books that we hold in our hand and sell them broadly and market them broadly, it's a walled garden. And it's not even a walled garden by intent at this point. The reality is that the people that are working as publishers, as editors, as agents, there's a superabundance of material that's out there, and it's impossible for anybody to plow through it all and find the good things. And so you end up triaging things to the agents that send you the stuff or the grad programs that recommend you to an agent. And the fact of the matter is that not all talent lives in New York City, went to Iowa or Columbia, but that doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It doesn't mean that the book you wrote isn't not only worthy of serious consideration, but wouldn't make a publisher a lot of money if they knew about it. And so our job is really to, go out and find the writers where they have great material, identify it as such, and then tell as many people as we can who can do something with it. This is something you should pay attention to.
When you talk about the research that you did, like as you talk about the book publishing industry, it sounds a lot like Hollywood. I mean, both industries are sort of prone to limited risk-taking, narrow entryways. They're both blockbuster-driven businesses.
Yeah.
Are there things that surprised you that were different about the publishing industry, or did they more surprise you that they were the same?
I think what surprised me more was how similar they were. But then when I stepped back and really thought about it, it didn't come as that big of a surprise, right? Like fundamentally, both businesses, film and television and books, like you said, they're hit-driven. They're businesses where the product is something that does not have an objective value to every potential consumer, right? Like you're trying to find things that you will put into the market and some people will love and not everybody will. And that doesn't mean that those people are wrong. It just means that they have an opinion about this thing. They are resource intensive in terms of evaluating them. So, to know whether a screenplay is something that you want to invest potentially millions of dollars in, you have to read the entire screenplay. Same thing with a manuscript. And that takes a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
There's a superabundance of things that are, written that no one could actually go through all of them. So I think those fundamental market dynamics, right? A subjective product, a superabundance of supply, no easy way to filter the quote unquote best things to the people that are most likely to respond to them, and increasing, revenue and cost pressures and the challenges of doing business at a high level in 2024.
Even for you, like how much of what's on the blacklist can you read personally? Even if the platform is highlighting things for you that are rising, you still can't absorb everything.
No, it would be impossible for any one person to even read all of the things that we think are worth people paying attention to that come through the Blacklist website. Our job is to sort of filter and sort the world in a way for each individual that would be most helpful to them. So when we send that email out every week to, several thousand film and television executives about the best scripts and television pilots and plays our readers read that week, my recommendation to industry professionals is look at the log lines. Does anything there sound interesting to you? Maybe then take a look at it because it meets the criteria of A, it's of interest based on subject matter, and B, someone else has validated, someone that you can trust has validated this as being possibly worth your time. And I won't promise that it will be worth your time. You may read it and say, actually, this isn't for me, but we've created a target-rich environment to find high-value things.
And the idea is the same thing will happen with novels for those in the publishing world.
For those in the publishing world and the film and TV world, because as much as publishers are looking for great novels, film and television people are looking for great novels that they can turn into film and television. So we have a partnership with Simon Kinberg, who maybe most famously produced The Martian, which he found as a self-published novel. So, when I came to him and said, this is what we're doing, I'd love to have a partnership where you commit to optioning a manuscript that we find in our first year for film or television adaptation. He was like, absolutely done, because he knows that there are things like The Martian being written that for whatever reason hadn't found their way into traditional publishing houses.
So you're linking up these two worlds, right? Because for a lot of book authors, the biggest upside for them is if it gets made into a film or a TV adaptation of some kind.
These two businesses are increasingly interdependent, right? Like getting your book adapted into a movie or TV show is great for book sales. And on the Hollywood side, when you think about the movies and TV shows that are getting greenlit, having some pre-existing material with which an audience is already familiar is a big boost to your marketing plan because you already have some built-in interest.
So novels are posted on the blacklist the same way screenplays and plays are. The writer would pay a monthly service fee, but you guys don't take a stake in something if it's discovered on the platform. Like,
no.
Why not? I mean, you're foregoing what may be the biggest financial opportunity. Like, why not act more like a VC and sort of take a little stake in everything? And, the things that hit, you get to...
Like, here's the thing. We are charging you for a specific service, feedback and hosting. If we were going to claim a financial upside in what follows, You're making a deal with a publishing house. You're making a deal with the studio. We should, and it's my belief that we should also be adding value throughout the value chain. And so if a VC wants to do that, and I'm open to this conversation, we should be optioning the material, providing support in producing it, involving the writer in the production of the thing. We should be the best publishing house in the game if we're going to have our own imprint. And a writer should still have the option to go somewhere else if they think they can get a better deal. And I think, and look, I think that we could provide additional services down the line? Yes. But again, I think the writer always deserves the option of taking the best deal. And that's what we're trying to enable.
In some ways, it echoes for me some of the things that I felt when I was an editor in the magazine world. But like you built the Blacklist into this respected, valued brand. It's a great tool for those who use it, creatives on the industry side. But it's not so easy to translate that into value for the Blacklist itself, right?
I mean, I think if I was profit-oriented, just as like a disposition, it might be frustrating. What we're building, there's an accrued value that happens just because of the place that we sit in the business. There was a recent study done by a producer named David Bobert looking at the movies that got made in the last 6 years. And half of them, roughly, came from original screenplays or adaptations of novels, right? Specifically fiction novels. So the Blacklist now has visibility over the inputs that represent 50% of the film production in the business on some level. There are a lot of businesses you could build atop that. And so my goal has always been build a business that was focused on impact initially. And if you build a business that successfully solves a problem and has that impact, and I think we have, the business that you could build on top of that is quite a profitable one. And that's a conversation that I'm excited to have, especially now that we have expanded into manuscripts, which was for me the last real brick in that initial foundation.
It's a classic entrepreneur spot. Like you have to be patient and impatient at the same time, right?
Yeah. And look, I think the other thing that differentiates us from a lot of companies is that I've never raised money, right? I own the company outright. We bootstrapped the entire thing and everything, and we were profitable on day one. We've been profitable literally every month we've been in existence. And so, it was purpose-built to solve a problem. And now that we've solved the problem, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity that comes from being able to spot the best things before everybody else. And these are the conversations that I'm going to be engaging in the next couple months, definitely over 2025. And yeah, I'll just put it out there. Anybody who wants to have that conversation with me should reach out. I'm pretty easily findable on the internet.
So the Blacklist isn't about Black writers or Black talent per se. It's about opening opportunities more broadly. Yeah. There have been some departures in the book publishing world, this industry, of some high-level Black executives coinciding with pullbacks elsewhere on commitments that were made post-George Floyd.
Yeah.
How does that impact the way your plans run with the platform?
I see a lot of this through the lens of irony. And McKinsey & Company did this study during the sort of immediate George Floyd era. What is the economic cost to Hollywood of its anti-Black bias? And what they found is that it runs about $10 billion every year. The lack of investment in Black films on a budgetary level, on a marketing budgetary level, and then in terms of international distribution, there's more money to be made. They did subsequent studies about the Latinx community. That's 12 to 18 billion a year, and the Asian American community, which is 2 to 4 billion a year. So we're talking about $30 billion a year that Hollywood is leaving on the table because they're not optimizing for the audience that they're trying to serve. So when I see Black executives leaving en masse from a culture industry, I begin to wonder about the competence of the people that are making those decisions, not because of some moral and ethical DEI imperative, but because their job is to make money for their company and not thinking about how to maximize that audience that is available to them is really going to cost that company money. I always wonder, how long are stockholders, going to be satisfied with leadership that isn't optimizing for economic outcomes. But, over time, the hope is that, economic success after economic success will validate the thesis and people will have to move based on wanting to optimize their economic ends.
So much of it seems to be what is seen as risky right? Like at the Emmys recently, Baby Reindeer's Richard Gere echoed some of what Court Jefferson, American Fiction, said at the Oscars, right? The industry needs to take more gambles on original work. And it sounds like what the Blacklist is trying to do in some ways is to make that easier by kind of pre-vetting things, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I always have anxiety when people say that they need to make more risky work, because I actually think that, like, if you're thinking about things rationally and you're trying to optimize for your economic outcomes, making more risky work is not necessarily the strategy. My argument is, what if our assumptions about what is risky are deeply flawed? And so we've been making decisions about risk assessment that are wrong, right? And I think there's considerable evidence to that effect. But, you know, for years I was told in my career, female-driven action movies don't work. They just don't work. Everybody knows they don't work. I remember thinking, like, okay, I guess that's true. And look, this is why Hunger Games was passed on by literally almost every studio. It was female-driven action doesn't work. I was at Universal at the time. But this is conventional wisdom that's like all convention and no wisdom. Similar thing, Black movies don't sell abroad. I genuinely don't know why people think that, but it was an assumption for a long time in the industry that I still think we're growing out of, but people weren't looking at the data. Coming to America made several $100 million internationally in the 80s. You know, Will Smith, Jamie Foxx, Denzel, they've been global movie stars for years. But those are the assumptions that define what is perceived as risky and not risky. And so my point of view is these assumptions are wrong. And when we change these assumptions, we're going to end up making more things that would have, in an old paradigm, been perceived as risky, but actually are optimal to make more money. And here's my favorite example of this. Harvard Business School did a study on the Blacklist a couple of years ago, the annual Blacklist survey. And these are scripts that at the end of the year aren't in production, but they are very much beloved by Hollywood executives. There are things like The Imitation Game and Slumdog Millionaire and Juno. But Harvard Business School found that movies made from Blacklist scripts, the weird ones, the things that people think, oh, it's impossible to make this, those are too risky, 90% more in revenue, controlling for all other factors, than movies made from scripts not on the annual Blacklist. And that's because great writing has a lot of value, no matter how risky the perceived subject matter is. But if you nail a good story well told, it's probably a good investment. It's probably your best investment.
I had Janice Min of The Ankler on recently after the Emmys, and she talked about how she feels like the entertainment industry is sort of, you know, running away from doing anything that's different. After the Oscars, you were pretty excited about the quality of the work that was recognized this year. Are you optimistic or wary about the future?
I will always have a great deal of optimism about the potential for creative people to solve problems in the pursuit of creating great art. Every year when the Emmys happen and the Oscars happen, if you look around at the nominees, you look around at the best movies that are made every year, the best TV that's made every year, you can make usually a pretty compelling case that, like, this is a pretty exciting time, that amazing things are being made. I think at the same time, the challenges that face those creatives to execute on those singular visions continue to increase. It's harder to get budgets. It's harder to get the resources that you need to get distribution in a way that can allow your thing to even be found. But I'm also optimistic because this remains the first era where a lot of kinds of people even have a chance to make anything, right? Like, a lot of people have nostalgia for 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. Oh, better things were being made. They were more idiosyncratic, and filmmakers had actual resources to do things. It's not true. It's a fiction. It's some filmmakers had resources to do things, but women filmmakers didn't. Filmmakers of color didn't. Queer filmmakers didn't. Disabled filmmakers didn't. And so I'd rather be in this era and be able to enjoy the bounty of those folks than a sort of fictive history where, oh, everything was easier. I'll also say that we have a sort of nostalgia about past eras in terms of where movies came from. Everyone's like, oh, there were so many more original movies made years ago. I was looking back at the top 30 movies in 1999. The vast majority of those are sequels and remakes and adaptations, right? So even then Even then.
Huh.
And by the way, if you think about Gone with the Wind is an adaptation of a novel, right? Like Birth of a Nation is an adaptation of a novel, if we're being real about it, right? So it is not as though we were already not, as a business, saying, wow, we're investing a lot of capital into making this thing that we're going to try to distribute to a lot of people. Wouldn't it be helpful if they were sort of already familiar with the story and the thing so that they were more excited to go to it? And I don't think anybody really cares all that much about whether something was adapted or a remake. They just want it to be good.
So I want to ask you a little bit about AI. AI is everywhere. Creatives tend to push back on it. Certainly some creatives. I'm curious where you stand on it. Like, would you ever entertain having AI review manuscripts and give feedback?
No, that I wouldn't entertain. The answer is just flat no. Serving up a writer's manuscript or screenplay to a LLM so that it can be trained on it and potentially repurpose what it's learned from that manuscript without compensation to the writer, like that's a no-no. And then also, I don't think that AI has yet made anything remotely close to a compelling case that it is interpreting information in the way a human brain does, specifically as it applies to emotion, which is ultimately the thing that art is trying to have an effect on. Like, I believe on some level, and this gets a little bit high-minded, but that like art on some fundamental level is a human being consuming something about the experience of what it means to be human and translating that into something that they want to share with somebody else. And the hope is that what you've shared with somebody else creates an emotional effect in the person that you've shared it with. And so what we're really testing for on the Blacklist is, does reading this thing make you feel, I've got to go tell everybody else I know about this thing, or I wouldn't wish reading this on my worst enemy? And I don't know that an AI can replicate that. Maybe it can sort of identify patterns. It can identify a lot of things, but I think as audience members, we're not looking for replication of what we've seen in the past. We're looking for something that surprises us and enraptures us. And I don't think that AI has proven any case that it can approximate that.
Do you think the profession of being a writer, like in the years ahead, is it going to change a lot?
I think it probably already has, right? Like if you talk to a lot of writers now, even just in the Hollywood context, there was a time when you would be on a TV show, there was a very specific schedule in the year. You'd be working for 24 to 36 weeks, and then you'd have a few weeks off, and then you go up for another show, and that would be how you sustain your career. Now you might be in a room for 6 weeks or less, and it could be any time during the year. You might be looking for a job. You're probably not going to set. You've written a spec script and you're trying to promote that, and you're using social media to promote your own personal brand. So all those things have definitely changed. But at the end of the day, to be a professional writer, you got to be writing. And that hasn't changed. You have to go into a room by yourself and put one word after the other and tell a story that moves people. That's part of the reason why I have such reverence for writers, is that they're going into rooms alone and willing worlds into existence. And the ones that are exceptional, like truly exceptional, who write the things that move all of us, deserve a heck of a lot of attention, a heck of a lot of praise, and probably a heck of a lot of money too.
Franklin, as always, this has been great to talk with you. Thanks so much for doing it.
No, thanks for having me back.